Welcome back, everybody, to the very latest episode of The Mental Gym. Today, we're joined by someone who it's very, very difficult to describe the impact this man has had on this team at Medology, me, and many thousands and millions of other people. It's an absolute honor. And even though we've become quite close over the years, having him here right now still feels like a dream. And we're very grateful. And I don't mean to say this to just shower unnecessary praise. I hope the episode shows you guys what this man's all about and how special he is. But we are joined by the soon to be Dr. Andreas Tzortzis, who is a mentor to us at Medology. He's taught us genuinely so many things over the years, and we've taken so much. And it doesn't feel right for me to introduce anything more about who he is. I would rather let him speak. But yeah, very grateful to have him here and hope you guys enjoyed the episode. But for now, I think we should pass the baton over to the man himself, Dr. Saab.
Not yet, soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah, bro. Thank you very much for your kind, undeserved words. Allah bless you. I don't know how to respond to what you've just said, but maybe a hadith comes to mind. Al-mu'minu miratul mu'min. The believer is a mirror of another believer. So, your happiness is my happiness. Your sadness is my sadness. Your success is my success. So, likewise, hopefully the things that you've said, although I don't think they're true, but they'll bounce back in some way. So
Yeah, I think we should just get straight into it. I've got a lot of questions for you, as I always do, but that's the fun. There's so much always to learn every time. But before we begin, I guess the most important thing is we know who you are, and people who are tuning in for the first time actually know everything that's gone on till now. So my question to you is, for the beginning, is that obviously you've had a very long career and done many different things, which we will unpack. But Medology itself occupies a very different space to the battles you fight daily. And there's going to be people that are listening in for the first time who've never seen you before, never heard of you, and never seen the work you've done. So to them, could you just tell us a bit about like who you are and like how this connection began and why you're sitting here today as the Medology sensei and all of that? So take us on a journey through time.
So, who am I? I don't know. I was speaking to a brother in the UAE about this. We're walking down, I think, the old part of Dubai, and we're having a conversation. And I was like, this whole discover yourself, who are you question is, or who am I question is a non-question Islamically. And I tell you why, because what's very interesting here is you are your relationships, isn't it? So to be is to be related. This was a statement of Bruce Lee, actually. Yeah, huge Bruce Lee fan. Oh, I was at least. And Bruce Lee was kind of underrated because he had his own kind of existential philosophical perspective. And when I read what he said or what he wrote, to be is to be related, it was quite fascinating because you are your relationships. And if you are your relationships, then to find out who you are, you need to actually engage in relations. And obviously, from an Islamic perspective, the greatest relationship you're ever going to have is with the one that created you. And what's interesting in the Quran doesn't say, find yourself. The Quran says, well, Allah says, God says, remember me and I will remember you. God says, do not be like those who forgot God, Allah, and Allah made them forget their own selves. So this shows that who you are, your way of being or your essence is contingent, dependent on your relationship with the divine. And this is interesting because a lot of the companions, for example, of the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, they felt like, they came to the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, with a question, and they said, we're different with you, we're different with our family, and maybe they felt it was like a bit of hypocrisy or something was going on. And the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, said, this is normal. So this is an indication of you are your relationships. And that's why I don't know who I am. I ask people who I am, because you learn a lot about yourself by just asking, give me some advice, bro. Who am I? Like, what do you think of me? And so I take not people in general. I don't care what other people think, but I care what people think if they're in my inner circle and they're committed to my well-being. So I would ask them, was I too harsh here? Was I too soft here? Who am I in this situation? And I learn a lot about myself through those relationships. So sorry for the long answer to that question. Who am I? So I know what you mean. but I thought it was important to raise this because I don't know who Mr. Andreas is, generally speaking. Um, but I'm someone who became Muslim around 23 years ago. That was 2002, October the 4th or 5th, I think, 2002. And ever since then, I've been someone who's tried to showcase the veracity of Islam, the godly way, submitting to the divine. And I've made many mistakes on the way, of course, but generally speaking, I've been involved in this kind of field. I've been writing essays. I wrote a book called The Divine Reality, God, Islam, and the Mirage of Atheism. I also wrote a book on co-authored a book on Palestine, which is called Unveiling Tyranny, the Genocide in Gaza, and Forced Zionist Narratives on Palestine. I have another book coming out in January 2026, or maybe even December this year, inshallah, God willing, which is called The Way of Love, 12 Reasons Why Only God, Allah, Deserves Our Worship. So I write books, I've been writing essays, and I was thrown into a leadership position in 2017 and I led a global outreach organization called IERA. And I learned a lot in that process because I was thrown into a leadership position and a lot was revealed and a lot was learned, and we could unpack that maybe a bit later. And then after that, I basically became the CEO and the founder of Sapience Institute. Our vision is that we see a world convinced of Islam, which basically means submission to God. And the way we try to achieve that is by developing, empowering, and educating individuals and organizations to share submission to God, share Islam, and defend Islam intellectually. And what else can we say? I come from a Greek background. My mum is Greek Cypriot. She's a refugee from the 1974 conflict with Turkey. And then my dad is from mainland Greece, although I don't look Greek really. But yeah, so I went to Greek school, know how to read and write Greek. What else is to say about me? I like fitness, boxing, martial arts, mixed martial arts. And yeah, I'm proud to be a Medology sensei. So what was the journey with that? Now you have to remind me, when was the first time we met?
Met you, well, actually, I messaged you first in June 2023. And I got your number through a mutual connection who knew you. And I think he asked you if we could message, and you were like, yeah, sure. So I messaged you and I gave like quite a big paragraph and whatever, as we do. And you got back saying, yeah, call me. Let's have a chat. So we spoke, I think, for like 2 minutes. And you asked me a very funny question. The very first thing you did on the phone was you asked me, could you describe the purpose of our engagement? like it was some interview. So no, it's absolutely fine. So I spoke to you and I kind of explained what we do and everything, and you were like, "Yeah, bro, at your service." But then I didn't contact you after that because I felt kind of guilty myself that you're very busy, you're doing a lot of different things. I didn't. I just thought I'll leave it for now. I've got your number at least, and whatever. We'll see what happens. But then I met you in Glasgow. You would do the Way of Love.
Way of Love tour, yeah? Yeah.
That's when I first kind of properly came across you in person. But actually, we'd been to a few of your talks in the past as well, pre 2023. But that's way before you knew anything about us or whatever. But I met you the first time in Glasgow. Yeah, I think March 2024. You did an event, you spoke, and afterwards I just came to say salam, hello, as we do, and I just showed you our Instagram page and then said, Ustad, it'd be amazing if we could do some sort of leadership program. And you're like, yeah, bro, let's do it. Give me dates. I'm there. And since then, we've not looked back, I guess.
Oh, and then we did the leadership kind of seminar in Manchester.
Yeah.
And then it's just evolved. Yeah, no, absolutely. And then we've done some other stuff as well, like on
Knowledge.
analyzing knowledge. Yeah, how to become what you know. Excellent. Yeah, no, I mean, to be honest, Medology has allowed me to communicate certain principles and beliefs and approaches that are quite close to my heart. And they've given me that platform because usually I don't really speak about them, maybe here and there, but because of the work that I'm involved in and because of my academic studies, this, that, and the other, I just don't have the chance. But you have actually given me that platform. So I'm actually quite grateful. And we've got future things coming up as well. And because I've had about what, maybe 8, 9 years of leadership experience, sharing that experience is a joy, because when you share experiences, you also refine the lessons that you've learned from those experiences, because knowledge is not just one way, because every time you talk about a particular experience through the communication and relation that you have with someone, they may give you an insight into your own experience that you weren't even aware of. Yeah, so that's one of the beauties of actually conveying your experiences and knowledge that you've learned, or lessons that you've learned, because through that process and that dynamic, if it's sincere and you're interacting with someone, they'll give you insights that you were never even aware of. um but yeah, so okay, great. So yeah, so Medology Sensei, I put that on my social media as well. I'm very happy that I could be of some kind of service to anyone, especially dedicated brothers and sisters in the Medology.
No, again, we're very grateful to have you. And I think up until now, we have done some very exciting events and things which weren't, no one really saw coming in terms of our community, but they have been very impactful. And especially for me, like, I just remember that Crisis of Knowledge workshop where you just taught us and unpacked so many principles on how to internalize what you know. And I think we will discuss that a bit later because they were so transformative and the team loved it, everyone loved it. And I think that was really when the vision came to life of this whole sensei thing. So we'll talk about that. But I think one thing you didn't mention in your intro was you didn't mention all your different like labels, like Master of Research, PhD, and MSc.
Oh yeah, my academic background. Yeah, so I've been doing academic philosophical work for about 11 years now. So
And the reason I mentioned that is actually because through this deep background in philosophy and over the last 20 years, you have done a lot of work, speaking to people of all different backgrounds, different stages, you've been global doing all this stuff. And one of the biggest things that we sort of teach our students at Medology and the community in general is we try and coach them on their communication and just being more confident. Because for those that don't know, we do a lot of work helping people that want to enter the medical profession. And to enter the medical and dental profession, you obviously have to do a lot of, training in terms of the way that you speak to people, your communication skills and everything. And there's so much, that's a huge topic in itself. And, you know, uh, again, that will be unpacked. But one thing I'm curious about, and I've never really heard you speak about this, I've even asked you about this as well, is from what I've seen, most people aren't naturally gifted when it comes to going on stage, speaking to people, or doing public sort of speeches and whatever. I'm very curious about like your journey with that in terms of, there must have been difficult moments. You mustn't have always felt ready to go out and speak, and there'll be moments where you felt nervous, and I'm sure you've been on a journey with your communication and public speaking and all that. So I'm curious, like, what's that journey been like, and what have the difficult moments been, and just again, I would love to have a full, you know, timeline of how that's
good
gone.
question. I mean, to answer the previous question very quickly, yeah. So my academic background is in philosophy. I've got a PG cert in philosophy and MA and MRes, and I just finished a PhD on theophilosophy, theological philosophy concerning the Quran. And please, everyone, I request everyone's prayers for me to pass the Viva. So the PhD is kind of done, and I'm waiting for the Viva, which should be done in the next kind of two or 3 months. Anyway, so communication, speaking journey. Okay, so there's been like two main phases of my kind of communication development, I think. When you're younger, especially maybe early 20s, mid 20s, even late 20s, you have, and I'm not speaking for everyone, I'm speaking for myself generally, but I've seen certain patterns, but I don't want it to be a generalization. Yeah. You have this kind of sense of inauthenticity. Yeah. What do you mean by inauthenticity? What I mean by inauthenticity is that you have kind of undeclared, maybe negative intentions in the context of communication, because sometimes when we communicate, we just want to look good. We don't want to look bad. We want to impose. We don't want to be imposed upon, yeah, and so on and so forth. And that's inauthentic. And people pick that up and they see, okay, the guy wants to come across smart. He wants to look good. Is his goal really, imparting some knowledge or trying to transform people? Or is it a mixture of a few things? So in my 20s especially, it was a mixture of a few things. Like, yeah, I do want people to understand this concept, this idea, or for it to transform them. But at the same time, I want to look good. I don't want to look bad. And maybe I want to impose. I don't want to be imposed upon. I want to be right. I never want to be wrong, to the degree that I give up the right way of being or the right way of communicating. Now, in that process, there were times where obviously I wasn't a great communicator, and the more I communicated, the better I became. But the transformation happened when I became more authentic. I kind of gave up the idea of always wanting to be right, never wanting to be wrong, always want to impose, never want to be imposed upon, always want to look good, never wanting to look bad, to the degree that I give up the right way of being, especially in terms of communication. So when I kind of gave that up, maybe in my early mid 30s onwards, it was liberating. And I remember I was giving a retreat or delivering a retreat in Denmark, and someone said to me, "How do you speak so passionately?" And especially when it's like, say, I got 100 people there, and it's like the energy is there. I read the room, and I'm hopefully dedicated to their well-being, and I'm just expressing myself. They were like, "How do you do this?" Yeah, because some studies have shown that people are afraid of public speaking more than death. Yeah, you know what I said to the guy? I said to him, the brother, I said to him, because I'm willing to fight every single one of you for what I'm saying. Now, obviously, I don't want to fight anyone, but if I'm willing to fight or to, have a duel, yeah, even if it means death for what I'm saying, it means you're freed of people's perceptions. You're freed of the ego to a certain degree. You're freed of just wanting to look good. You're committed to exactly what you're saying and the concepts that you want to deliver and what you want people to internalize because you're committed to their well-being. And yeah, so those were the two major phases. And to improve in your communication, you just have to be sincere to the well-being of others, because why are you communicating to them? You're communicating to them, or you're trying to impart certain knowledge because why? Obviously you believe in what you're saying, but you're committed to the well-being because you think this is good for them and you want to optimize human beings. And that's why the art of communication also is also the art of love. Because, and what I mean by love here is being committed to the well-being of other people. You want their goodness and you want their guidance. So if you're committed egolessly in that way, then the way you communicate is going to be quite profound, and you won't have that kind of negative intentions, undeclared negative intentions. You won't have that inauthenticity. Also, there's a sense of egolessness. Not that obviously we're ego free, but you're trying to achieve a sense of egolessness, meaning that you're not there just to look good and to impose and always to be right, because those things could be barriers to effective communication, right? Especially if you're focused on that, because those things are a kind of, they're a means to the communication outcome. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say here is, if you're committed to the well-being of your audience and you're authentic, you don't have any negative intentions, and you try to be as egoless as possible. It's not just about looking good and looking bad, and not looking bad and imposing, and not wanting to be imposed upon, and wanting to be right and never want to be wrong, to the degree that you impact your communication, impact your 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 engagement with others. um yeah, so you should be as egoless as possible from that perspective. So hopefully I'm getting that quite clear. So um which is the irony, because I'm now not communicating effectively exactly how to become an effective communicator. But I think the point here is, what one needs to realize is, be committed to the well-being of others. Don't have undeclared negative intentions. Don't focus on being right and not being wrong, imposing and not being imposed upon, and looking good and not looking bad, to the degree that it impacts the right way of being or the right way of communicating, and it impacts the goals of your communication, which is to transform people and to be committed to the goodness and the guidance. So we need to be committed to the goodness and guidance of all people. Then that's how you see effective communicators. And the way to develop that is to keep on doing it. You're gonna fail. Sometimes you're not gonna say the right words. Sometimes you're gonna hum and you're gonna but you just have to give up that kind of give up your right to look good all the time. Sometimes you're gonna have some, eloquent moments. Other times you're gonna be like, it's not working out for me. But just keep on doing it. So the more you communicate sincerely, being committed to the well-being of who you're communicating to, and the more you have, you're as egoless as possible. And it's not just about you looking good and being right and not being imposed upon and you imposing. It's not just about that. It's about the goal of the communication, and you keep on practicing it. You'll be a great communicator at some point, because there's a Islamic saying. I don't know who said it, but I think some of the scholars always repeat it, which is if you speak with the heart, it will go straight to the heart. So sometimes people are not great, effective communicators, but they speak with such passion and love and commitment to the people that they're communicating to, and it just hits their heart, you know? So, but that requires some of the things that I've mentioned. Like, don't think it's about you just looking good and being articulate. And you could tell, like, when you see some people who are very articulate and eloquent, but there's a sense of inauthenticity, you might like them, but you're like, I'm not engaging with this person. Do you see? So I think those 2 points are quite clear. I mean, just to summarize the waffle, number one, be committed to the well-being of others, the goodness and guidance, which is a sense of love. And number two, don't have any undeclared negative intentions and be as egoless as possible. And if you do that in your communication, you'll win most people over, I think.
I mean, the thing with you is that every single principle that you give could be delivered as a full day sort of seminar. There's so much to unpack in what you said, but the main principles, yeah, I'm sure everyone heard them, so please take note. And I can really attest to the whole thing about just keep doing it, because no one's perfect at it. I've messed up so many things in my head right now that I can think of, even within this last 20 minutes or however long this podcast has been going on for. So we're always on a journey, we're always improving. And my question to you is, so you've given us a lot of good mindset sort of things and psychological and spiritual framings, but from a more technical perspective, do you think there's anything that really stands out to you that's important, or do you think it's like how much do you value the technical side of when it comes to speaking and communicating? Do you think that's come secondary?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, I'm not an expert on this, right?
Yeah.
But intuitively, the technical stuff is secondary because look, if you have someone who's like sincerely committed to your well-being, your goodness, your optimization, your well-being, your guidance, and you got someone who's coming across as egoless as possible, you know, the English could be their third language and they could stutter, but the way they come across, and obviously behind that you need a bit of passion, you need a bit of, you know, all of that authenticity, that passion, that energy, you know, if they're authentic with that as well and it comes across naturally, they'll win anyone over, right? Look at Simon Sinek, for example. I'm a fan of Simon Sinek because a lot of his books actually are so in line with the prophetic, you know, approach to leadership, that love service leadership, the infinite game, you know, looking beyond your own life and so on and so forth. He's got some interesting principles. Look at the way he talks. You could tell he's made up his mind that he's dedicated to optimizing people, finding their why, finding their vision, and actually working towards it. It's not, you know, he obviously he benefits in his own way, but generally speaking, you could tell that there's a sense of authenticity and sincerity when he's speaking to other people. And you've seen some of his conversations; they may not have been the most eloquent, but they're so moving, especially when he talks about how to deal with friendship and how to be true friends. So what I'm saying here is I do value the technical side. Of course, you can improve your communication, but I think you cannot beat the two things that I mentioned, which were show that love, be committed to people's well-being, be authentic, don't have any undeclared negative intentions, and be passionate. And the more you do it, the better you become. Yeah, you know, but don't be fake, don't be inauthentic. People could pick it up. I think human beings have that radar. You know, okay, that you know, politicians could be very eloquent, some of them, right? But if you look at them, you're like, well, they're just reading from a script, or they just practice this 1,000 times, and they know it's coming from a political agenda point of view. Even though it sounds nice and it may be emotive, it's not going to reach the optimal. You know, it's not going to be optimal with regards to communication and influencing the audience because people know, they can tell, right? Unless of course they're genuine leaders and they don't have any kind of undeclared negative intentions, and you know they really believe in what they're saying completely, which is kind of rare today. But a lot of it is what's coming through here, I think. Yeah, and I've seen that. You see it everywhere, you know. um yeah, I mean, don't underestimate passion, because you know, passion gives birth to passion, love gives birth to love. And when you come across that way, people are just like, you know, it's magnetic.
I think what I love about what you've said, which is being egoless and being committed to people's goodness and guidance, like the beauty is that it doesn't just apply to going on stage and speaking, but it applies to our friendships, relationships, and otherwise. Like it's so universal, but it really is the key, isn't it, to just getting the message across. But one question that I kind of had following on from this whole thing about how, yeah, obviously getting your message across to someone is one thing, and you can be really effective at that. But you've talked about this many times as well about how just information or just knowledge isn't always enough to transform someone or shift their perspective. Um, so, what do you think the missing piece is? What is the missing piece to be able to? It's one thing getting and transferring the info, like some Bluetooth or Wi-Fi transfer, into someone's heart, but how does that message actually impact them? How is it going to transform them? What's the gap?
Oh, well, this is lot. There's so much to say here. So look, I can teach you, say, how to communicate, or I can teach you, how to do a good left jab and a right cross in boxing, or I can teach you, maybe that wasn't a good example, but let's keep it academic here. Say I can teach you what the kind of spiritual diseases of the heart are, like ego and jealousy and ostentation and self-amazement, yeah? And then I can give you the remedies, and I can teach you how to deal with your ego, or I can give you the kind of top 5 principles on how to deal with ostentation, or whatever. That knowledge will be abstract, right? Unless you internalize it. And I can teach you that, and you could spend the rest of the year not dealing with the disease of the heart, like arrogance, ego, ostentation, jealousy, and self-amazement. The only way that you'll be able to take what I taught you in abstraction is if you internalize it. And what that shows is that there is a gap between what we know and who we become. And let me just make this a little bit more simple. You could probably write a book on how to be a great son, right? Or an essay at least. Now, if I ask you a question, have you been the best son all the time? Probably not. No one's always optimal, yeah? We're not always, we're not achieving our peak all the time. Like, I could probably write a decent essay on how to be a great father. Have I always been a great father? No way. I could probably write a couple of essays on how to be a great husband, but am I always a great husband? No. I could, let's make it less personal maybe. You can probably tell me, like, how to become an athlete and eat the right foods. Like, but what did you have yesterday for dinner? Like something, like KFC or something, or whatever it is, some fried chicken, which is not necessarily good for you, right? So in our day-to-day life, we know what's optimal in from a knowledge perspective, but we don't become that which we know. So there's a gap between what we know and who we are. So how do you bridge that gap? And that's the biggest question for most human beings, to be honest. Like, we know what it takes sometimes to be, a great dad or a great parent or a great athlete, or okay, there may be some gaps in our knowledge, but generally speaking, that's easy to learn. And that's why I'm kind of disappointed with the online world, generally speaking. It's just abstract information. It doesn't change your way of being, because knowledge doesn't give you access to being. Knowledge does not give you access to being, yeah? So to become that which you know, there's so many things that we have to do. One thing is to first acknowledge that there is a gap. Yeah, just be sincere to yourself. Treat yourself as your best buddy, and love yourself. True love, self-love, wanting goodness for yourself. Like, I appreciate that. I want to be healthy, and I know what a healthy life means. I have to exercise. I have to eat good foods. I know all that information, but I'm not becoming healthy. Okay, why? Because there is a gap. Okay, why is there a gap? Now, the very fact that you notice that there is a gap because you're sincere to yourself is part of the journey, right? So acknowledging that there is a gap between knowing and becoming. Yeah. The other thing that people need to also recognize is that you need to have a vision, right? Sometimes you have to see yourself in a particular way that is grounded in something of value. For example, an athlete, the reason that they become successful is because not that, oh, I just want to become fit. They have a vision for themselves, whether it's, winning a competition or being the best martial artist or being the fastest runner or whatever the case may be. If they have a vision for themselves that is grounded in some kind of meaning, then what that does, and they identify with that vision, then their way of being will follow. The language that they use and the actions that we use will be more in line will be more in line with the right way of being. It'll be more in line with the knowledge that they have. So they're bridging the gap, right? Like for example, say a boxing fight that I had, yeah. I want to do my best in this boxing fight, yeah. And I have an 8-week camp. So where do I see myself in 8 weeks? I see myself as being optimal. Winning or losing is kind of irrelevant because you could win and still not be optimal. And I don't find that satisfying, yeah. Like, Mike Tyson can beat up a 7-year-old. Okay, he won, but yeah, did he win himself? Was he optimal? No. So it's me being optimal, right? And that's my vision. I'm identifying with being optimal. How do I achieve that? I achieve that by doing certain things based on knowledge that I have. But because I've identified with that vision and say it's grounded in something meaningful, it's going to help me bridge the gap between knowing and becoming. Another thing, apart from having a vision, is sometimes just acting. So sometimes we get bogged down with too much knowledge. Okay, you know what you know what you have to do, but sometimes just do it, because emotion follows action. Sometimes we want to have the emotion and then act. No, just do the act and the emotion will come. Because if you have a vision for yourself, or you understand that I want to identify as someone who is, say a good father or a good parent, and that's a vision for yourself, then you've identified with it. But sometimes the emotions don't come, the way of being doesn't come, for so many different human reasons. Just act, and the more you repeatedly act, something would happen. You start to internalize that way of being. But it's important to actually identify with who you want to become first, yeah. And then acting, even if you don't feel it, because you've identified that way, and you do want to achieve that goal for yourself, good parent, good husband, whatever the case may be, even though the action may not have the right emotions or intentions, just act, man. Just act, yeah. And that's why we say be, do, then you become, yeah. So be, who do you want to be? I want to be a great parent. Okay, well, just do the action that connects to that, and then you become it, yeah. So that's another important thing that people need to realize. There's so many aspects. I think in the course that we did about 12. We can't cover them right now, but the point here is being cognizant that there is a gap between what we know and who we become is very important. The other thing is that's important, which I just want to briefly mention, is focus on your language, and focus on, so we already spoke about the actions, but focus on your language, because your framing is very important. Which is interesting because the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, he said that he likes the good word, the optimistic word. And he said another authentic tradition that if your soul has kind of made a mistake, don't say my soul has been wicked. Just say my soul has made a mistake, or it has erred. So even the way you frame yourself is very important, because language frames who you become. And that's why people use the wrong type of language for themselves and others, and it just shapes, how they communicate and interact with that particular thing. Now, why is language important in the process of internalizing knowledge? Is because you want to use a particular language that helps you internalize knowledge. For example, if you want to be a person of remembering God, yeah, you may know all of the authentic traditions in the prophetic tradition. You may know all of the verses in the Quran on the importance of remembering God, but you may never become a person who remembers God. So one way of doing it from a language point of view is the way you talk about yourself, and your self-talk is such that it facilitates you remembering God. Yeah. You won't be like, oh, I know all this information, but I'm such a failure. I don't remember God. I'm a hypocrite. That's actually not prophetic language to use for yourself. You say, okay, I'm just beginning. You remember we spoke about the importance of a vision. You want to be someone who's remembering God, who's connecting to God, and the language that you're using about yourself should be such that actually facilitates that process. People underestimate that a lot, but the way you frame things is so significant, because language is extremely significant, especially when it comes to emotions and so on and so forth. So there's a whole lot of things to talk about. We go through about 12 things in the workshop, but we can't cover it now. But these are some of the important things that maybe people should be cognizant of. Realize that there is a gap between what we know who we become. Make sure you have a vision for yourself, which is very important. That's grounded in something of value and meaning, and identify with that vision. And that would help you actually act in accordance. Sometimes to just act, don't just rely on the emotions or something. You have to have the best intentions or the best emotions behind it. If you already identified, you've got the vision, just act. And as you act, you'll become. Be, do, and you become, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the things that is quite important, because the greatest crisis, especially I think in the online world, is all knowledge. It's not about being. You don't you we see it all the time on like the shorts and the YouTube clips and the reels and whatever. 5 signs you're a narcissist, or 3 signs she's not the one, or this is how you do X and this is how you do Y, which is fine. We need that to a certain degree, but then people have the same problems. People are not really transforming. So how do you transform? Because knowledge, abstract knowledge, doesn't give access to being. So you could like 5 signs you're a good parent, or if you do these 5 things, you'll be a great parent. Okay, are you going to even do them? Or even if you do them, are you going to be a great parent? Maybe not. Okay, so what can we give to people to be able to internalize those principles or that knowledge? And I think that's one of the crises of the internet, right? We need to be able to get them to internalize the things that they learn, because knowledge doesn't give access to being. So how do we change that way of being? And I think one of the problems, especially in the Muslim community, unfortunately, you have what kind of statements are they called? Are they called descriptive statements? Yeah, there's a lot of descriptive things going on. Do this, know this. Here's a prophetic tradition. 5 signs you're this, 3 signs you're not this, that, and the other. Fine, that's great to a certain degree, but then no one changes, no one transforms. You may have some anecdotal evidence here and there, but how does it apply in that person's life in that particular context? How do you internalize that? And that's why we have to have another strategy, which is the real world strategy. Because through relationships, through mentoring, through contextualizing that knowledge and applying in your life and having someone to help you and being reminded, being held to account, having a good environment, that's what's going to help you transform. Not just like, just zombie scrolling and just learning abstract things all the time. Yeah. I hope I got the message clear there.
No, you absolutely did. And I think I'm just asking questions that are so vast and broad, and there's so much to them for a reason. And that reason is to give everyone a flavor of all the different topics and themes that you have discussed and will discuss in the future, because there's so much. But for now, we'll respect your time, because I know we could be here till next week talking about this. But I think you touched upon something which a lot of students will resonate with, and that is the whole idea of finding a vision. I know many university students and people that we mentor and whatever else, everyone is trying to seek some sort of purpose or trying to find their calling, if that makes sense. And I know you do a lot of work with this with Sapiens and throughout your whole career as well. How does someone find their vision, you would say? How does someone find what their calling is? What's your experience of that been, and how would you advise someone who hasn't found theirs to find theirs?
So it actually depends where you are in your life journey, because sometimes we don't even advise people to have a vision. It depends how young they are and how they're developing. So what we may advise someone is have micro visions, right? So let's contextualize it from a kind of spiritual Islamic perspective. So if someone's like 18 and they want to basically have a grand vision, lofty vision for the world, which is quite a big thing, depending on their own kind of capacities and the experience, we might just say to them, right, have micro visions, meaning, are you connected to God? Are you praying 5 times a day? Are you, doing certain spiritual activities that are important for your internal development? And we may give them certain micro goals, or if you like, or micro visions for certain things, whether it's to do with health, fitness, spirituality, knowledge. And then when they start developing further, then they're psychologically, intellectually, and even maybe socially ready to have a grand vision. Yeah. So sometimes people think, we glamorize the whole process. What's your vision for your life? Well, there's nothing wrong with saying I don't know. You know, especially if you're young, you don't know. Everyone's got their own journey. If you ask me what my vision was when I was 18, I'm like, get out of here, man. Yeah, I kind of matured after 25. I matured a bit later, right? Maybe because, for most men, their brains stop developing at 25, right? It still develops up to the age of 25, maybe even 28, right? So, you know, some people are just not ready. So I think that's important because you don't want people to beat themselves up just because they don't have the kind of internal, external, spiritual, intellectual uh, level to be able to even think about these things. Yeah, they may have drives and wants and likes and dislikes, but are they ready for a grand vision? Probably not, generally speaking. Okay, so what you do then, you get them to focus on like micro goals or micro visions, whether it's health, fitness, spirituality. And so, one from a spiritual perspective, pray 5 times a day, maybe follow the prophetic way, like fasting on Mondays and Thursdays, read Quran, do your remembrance, your dhikr, and so on and so forth, your du'as, your supplication, give sadaqah, give charity, try and emulate the life of the Prophet Muhammad upon whom be peace, in principle and in practice. And then when you're developing yourself, and also learn more as well about Islam, about life, and not just godly knowledge, but other knowledge as well. And then when you develop yourself intellectually, spiritually, even physically, get fit as well, that helps. Then you may be in a stage where like, okay, now I'm ready for a grand lofty goal. Yeah. So that's important to just to add. And that's what we teach in one of our projects called the Visionaries. So then to find a vision for yourself. So it has to be connected with the idea of success. Yeah. So if you don't know what success is, what success means for you, then it's going to be very hard to have a vision, because why are you having a vision in the first place? Yeah. What is that vision? What do you want to achieve? What is it a vehicle for? So we have a lengthy discussion on what success is. And obviously we frame it from an Islamic perspective. Generally speaking, success is entering paradise, which is eternal bliss. Yeah. So there's no point having a vision that's not going to take you there, because then it's kind of pointless in the grand cosmic scheme of things, right? Now that's not to belittle, things that people do in their lives to actually do something good for the world, for sure. But obviously, I have to frame it from, you know, our tradition, the Islamic perspective, which is, well, what is this really all about? What do you really want to achieve? And your long-term stretch goal should take you to ultimate success. And the Quran says, God says that success is going into paradise, essentially. Yeah. Is there a conversation to be had about, can you have success in the worldly life and the other worldly life at the same time? Of course. Yeah. We're not just saying, you know, just focus on the hereafter and ignore the world. No, that Islam doesn't work that way, because the Quran talks about, the supplication that we should make, that we supplicate to God and we ask for the best in this life and the best in the life to come. And there's a discussion to be had in terms of, what does success mean from a worldly perspective and an otherworldly perspective. But we don't have time to unpack that. But I just want to bring that in there so you don't think that we're just like monks, yeah? We're just sitting in a cave and just waiting for the hereafter, and just, Islam doesn't work that way. It's very practical. It's very dunya orientated, worldly orientated, and otherworldly orientated as well. And what you do in this world affects the other world. But generally speaking, your focus should be the eye on the prize, which is, I want God to be pleased with me and I want to enter paradise. So success is a very important thing to unpack first and foremost. And it echoes the famous prophetic tradition where there's a man who has suffered an entire lifetime. So he's someone who's suffered the most in the world, and he's destined for paradise, and he'll be split into paradise. Oh, not split, sorry, he'll be dipped into paradise for a split moment, and he'll be asked, did you ever suffer? And you say, by God, I have never suffered. So someone could have a miserable life full of suffering, but have ultimate success as well. Which is something important, because that framing is important too. So that's the ultimate success. Now, once we unpack what success looks like, then now you start thinking about, okay, how do I see the world? So there are differences of opinion on what a vision is, but generally speaking, it's a long-term stretch goal. Yeah. And your long-term stretch goal should be lofty. It should be big. It's how you see the world, right? Now, what's going to motivate you in how you see the world? What's going to motivate you is your concept of success first. But it's also, what also is going to motivate you, your how you see the world is your value system, yeah, and your emotions and your inclinations and affinity towards certain values within that system, right? So someone may say, I see a world where there is no poverty. Okay, good. So that's going to help you have the ultimate success, because if you're doing it for the sake of God, that's a great noble act. It's an act of worship, eradicating poverty, and that could take you to paradise. Okay, good. But why pick that particular goal, that particular long-term stretch goal? Is because there's something within you that, you're touched by it, right? Some people have, a hierarchy of things that they have an affinity for. Some people are really concerned about eradicating poverty and helping people who are poor, which is noble. It's also Islamic, it's grounded in our values. But the reason you focused on it, because it's your natural disposition. So find out what your natural disposition is for certain things. Like for me, it's about meaning and truth. And that could be as a result of trauma I had when I was a kid, or God knows, my own life experiences. But those were God given in order for me to have that affinity. Yeah. So, your vision should be connected to success, as we just mentioned, but your vision should be a long-term stretch goal, and it should be grounded in your value system. Because if you don't value it, then you're not going to achieve it, and it's not really something that's even worthy to be described as a vision. So it's within your value system, and there's going to be something within that value system that you have an affinity for. It could be because of where you brought up. It could be just what's been given to you in your innate nature by the divine. Who knows? But find out what that is. And the way to do that is to ask your friends, to ask the people around you, like, what am I passionate about? What do I talk about all the time? What do I emotionally react to? It could be a whole bunch of questions that you ask them. They're like, you know what? You're always concerned about meaning and truth. Now, hopefully, with my circle, they'll be like, you don't like small talk, or you're always about deeper, meaningful things. You ask the why of the why. Yeah. You like to go straight to the foundations, or to the lens that people use to understand reality. You want the things that you say, you always want them to be a representation of the actual state of affairs, meaning it mirrors reality. This is you, man. And you change your mind when you're proven wrong, for example. So my whole essence is about truth and authenticity, or meaningfulness, yeah. And I could probably trace that back to childhood experiences, yeah. So my vision, therefore, is a world convinced of submission to God, Islam, yeah. And I know where that's come from. Fine. And it's within the value system, and it's connected to success. Do you see my point? So people will find the vision within their value system, and they will ask their friends in terms of, their way of being, and what they focus on, and what they emotionally react to, and also, the way they come across passionate about certain things. And you'll have a pattern from your friends that, okay, this person's really concerned about people's well-being. This person's really concerned about truth, and that would help you develop your vision within your value system. So yeah, my one is a world convinced of submission to God, Islam. And that's a long-term stretch goal. That could happen in 100 years, 1,000 years. But, I'm not here for my lifetime. I'm here for the infinite game. So what I do now, hopefully, will continue, and it will influence and impact other people. And that's connected to success, because that is a vehicle for the otherworldly success that we just mentioned. It's connected to values, because sharing Islam, conveying Islam to people, showing that they have a purpose in life, which is to serve and to submit to God, to humbly adore God. That is one of the highest values in Islam. It is the way of the prophets, and so it's within my value system, and I'm inclined towards it because the way I've been developed as a child, my childhood experiences, my traumas, my negative and positive experiences, my friends, my family, the internal value system within my, family, structure, this, that, and the other, I ended up being someone who was more had an affinity towards things that are meaningful and it's about truth. And that's what's helped me pick that particular value. So that particular vision. So likewise, if someone else, it could be something different. It could be, I see a world that, you know, is free of poverty. Okay. Yes, if from an Islamic perspective, that would help them with the ultimate success, which is paradise, because it has a lot of virtue. It is within the value system, because one of the key principles of Islam is to ensure that people have food, shelter, and clothing. They're not suffering. We're committed to people's well-being. The whole concept of zakah, which is, the obligatory kind of charitable tax, if you like, for Muslims, and also sadaqah, which is the voluntary charity that you give. And the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, saying that sadaqah is basically proof of your conviction in the divine reality, in God, right? It's proof of your submission to God, is giving sadaqah, is giving charity. So it's a high value, it's valued. And the reason now you've picked that value is because of your friends are telling you, you're always a giver, you always give. You always like to take care of people. You don't want people to be upset. You commit to their physical and their financial well-being. You always want to help other people out. Every time, you walk down the street, you're giving someone some money, and you always want to be there for people. You're very charitable. Yeah. And that could be linked because of childhood experiences, parenting, whatever. But you'll find that out by asking your close friends about who you are and how you react to things. What is a common pattern in your actions? What is a common pattern in the way you talk about things and the way you emphasize certain values like charity and giving? So that's how you would unpack your vision. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if I were to speak to someone right now, I would say to them, what is your definition of success? Then I would say to them, what is your value system? And I would say to them, talk to your friends and close circle to find out within that value system what is one value that you always emphasize with your language and your actions. And that would end up being your vision. So that's to universalize the process. But obviously, from an Islamic perspective, we talk about what success is, like going to paradise. And we talk about the value system, which is the Islamic value system, which we also believe is universal as well. The godly way of life, submission to God. And then I'll do the same thing and just say, what is the thing that you repeatedly talk about or you emphasize, and the actions that you do that we can create a kind of understanding of what you have an affinity for the most, and that would be helping you find your vision. So as I said, for me, it's a world convinced of Islam, and I could trace it exactly why I have that view, and it's linked to the Islamic concept of success, and it's within the value system. The reason I'm picking that particular value, conveying Islam, conviction, all of these things, is because I have an affinity for it. Why? My friends could tell you, my parents could tell you, because I was always about, generally speaking, about meaning and about truth. And I could link it back even to traumatic experiences, right? Like I remember when I used to sit in a bath when I was around 12 years old, and I used to cry because I felt quite lonely, or I felt like things were kind of meaningless, because I realized that I was the only one aware of my own conscious awareness at that moment. And I wasn't aware of the conscious awareness or experienced the conscious awareness of other people that I love that weren't there. Now, that's like a form of solipsism, but the point is that made me extremely lonely. And I think ever since then, it's actually forced me to focus on value and meaning and truth. And because that was a kind of emotional, you know, it was a psychological crisis point for me, because I was like, oh my God, how do I make sense of this? Because generally speaking, people are going to have three major experiences before they're 18, which one of them is I'm alone, the other one is something's wrong, and the other one is I don't belong. And I kind of had all three in one. I think, yeah. People have them separately sometimes, and that forced the sense of looking for meaning, looking for truth, looking for understanding. Yeah, so that was part of the process. So yeah, so if people want to get a vision, have a vision for their lives, define success, find out what your value system is, and ask your friends and your close circle in terms of the way you speak, the way you act, in accordance to that value system. And one of those values amongst that value system would be the thing that will be related to your vision, because you'll have an affinity for it. And I think that's one of the best ways of doing it. Yeah.
Okay, so
And this echoes like what Simon Sinek says, generally speaking, and others. But I've tried to frame it in terms of what we try to do. But in the beginning, I also said you may not even be ready for a grand vision, a lofty vision, a long-term stretch goal. But we don't want to stop because you'll have to develop yourself to a certain intellectual and spiritual or even ethical perspective to be ready to even have that long-term stretch goal. The other thing that I just want to quickly mention is it's not just about how you see the world as well. So yeah, so for me, I see the world convinced of submission to God. That's how I see the world. But then I should ask the question, well, who must I now be? And then I have to ask another question, which is, what must I now do in order to be, in order to see the world convinced of Islam? So we call it the see, the be, and the do. And that's very important because that is, I think, a more of a holistic approach that actually allows you to traverse the path to achieve your vision. So, how do you see the world? Then you ask, who must I be? Then you now ask, what must I do? Which becomes your strategy, if you like, the collective or individual daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, or lifetime things that you have to do that necessarily link to achieving your vision and who you need to be. And you need to do that regularly. And that's how you're going to achieve what you want to achieve. For example, let's make it very basic. If I want to, you know, if I want to become a great teacher, for example, a philosophy instructor or teacher, that's how I see myself, right? Because I see a world that is philosophically, I don't know, grounded or inspired, or I see the world where, everyone's, in love with philosophy. And so that's how I see the world. Well, who do I need to be? Well, I need to be someone who's loving philosophy as well. So what do I need to do? I need to do what philosophers do. And I need to do something on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, and lifetime perspective that is linked to who I need to be and how I see the world. So that means I need to, learn philosophy, teach philosophy, and so on and so forth. If you don't have that, then you're not going to achieve that, right? Likewise, I see the world convinced of submission to God, convinced of Islam. Okay, well, who do I need to be now? I need to be convinced of Islam. And I need to be able to convince others of Islam, or at least develop people to be able to convince others of Islam as well. So that's the C, now that's the B. And not just that, I need to have the internal psychological, spiritual state, or even intellectual state, to be someone who can convince others concerning submission to God. Because conviction is not just an abstract intellectual thing, it's a spiritual thing, it's a social thing. And I need to develop others, as I just said. Then now I need to do certain things on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, and lifetime perspective that links to who I need to be in order to see the world in a particular way. So, what are those things? Well, those things are split into different domains of your existence: the physical, like physical fitness, health, spirituality, intellectual knowledge, spiritual knowledge, and so on and so forth. The professional knowledge, yeah, especially I'm going to lead a group of people. So you see that I have to do certain actions on a regular basis that necessarily link to the achievement of my who I need to be and how I see the world. So, for example, you won't see me, generally speaking, binging on Netflix series. That's not my daily thing, right? Why? I've got bigger fish to fry. I have a vision for my life. I need to be someone, and I need to do certain things on a regular basis that necessarily link to who I need to be in order to see the world in a particular way. And that's why a vision sorts your life out. Don't get me wrong, I'm not gunning down people who watch series. I mean, especially if it's ethical and it's okay. But I'm just saying, if you have a vision, you won't be stuck with those things. Do you see my point? Like, for example, you became a doctor. Congratulations. That was a micro, say, call that a micro vision. Yeah. Now, you have a vision of becoming a doctor. Now, fine. So I see the world where I'm a doctor. So I need to be a doctor and do what doctors do. Okay, well, okay. So how do I do that? Well, I need to study. So imagine now saying, no, I'm not going to study. I'm just going to chill out and play snooker every day. Or I'm going to play pool. Or I'm just going to binge on documentaries. Or I'm going to watch Netflix or Amazon Prime series, or whatever the case may be. You're not going to achieve what you need to achieve. You're not going to do the things that allow you to be the person that you want to be in order to see yourself in a particular way. Similar. So That's what we try and do. We get people to connect how they see the world with who they need to be and what they need to do. And what we do, we usually give them get them to develop a spreadsheet of different domains of their life: spirituality, intellectual, maybe even theological, depending on what their vision is, physical, familial, meaning family. How should they set up their family and the relationship that they have, and so on and so forth. And then we say, right, what do you do daily now? What do you do weekly? What do you do monthly? What do you do yearly? What do you do from a lifetime perspective? And then we get another kind of column saying you need to demonstrate how that action links to who you need to be in order to achieve how you see the world. So it's very carefully constructed. And that's why many people who are in business, they have a vision for themselves in terms of, I see a world where, I don't know, someone might say, I'm the richest man in the world or something, or whatever. It's not a great vision to have, but say for argument's sake. Now, who do they need to be? They need to be in a certain way of being in order to achieve that. So what do they need to do? So that you would see that many people who have a strong vision that's linked to the value system and linked to the notion of success, they're not going to waste time. They're not going to be like, oh, I'm going, I'm going to watch TV now. I'm going to just, zombie scroll on Instagram or whatever the case may be. And your life is revolved around that. Like the other day, yesterday, I met an academic to help them build their institute from a marketing perspective, financial perspective, vision strategy perspective. And I spent time with him, about maybe 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever, how long it was. And I was trying to show him the importance of having a vision and a strategy, and why it dictates what you do. And I used me as an example. Why am I here with you? I'm here with you because I know it's part of my strategy. Because yes, my vision is I see a world convinced of Islam, but the way I want to achieve that is by developing individuals and organizations to actually facilitate that vision. And that's why I'm with you. Like, in the grand cosmic scheme of things, I'm not doing you a favor. I'm doing me a favor, because that's my vision. My vision is to support and empower you as an individual and as an organization. And he was like, oh, he kind of something, I think something clicked to get him into that way of being as well, to focus on a vision and a strategy. Yeah. So a lot of the things, like I'm here today why am I here in the podcast? Medology is another organization, right? I'm a sensei of Medology. Fine, maybe your work is not necessarily about the main vision, convince people of Islam, but it's sometimes it's an important vision that facilitates that as well, because you want to you have so many things that you're doing. You're empowering the future doctors and dentists of the world. You are conveying knowledge to people that is universal based on our tradition, right? Whether it's to do with internalizing knowledge or having a vision or leadership. And there's so many other things that you want to do concerning communication, integrity, and listening with the intention to understand. How do you be a good communicator? And these, and you're leading the way as a spiritually grounded organization. That itself, and me being associated with that, and me having my own vision as well, is just a beacon of light for the community, because I realize convinced of Islam is not just an intellectual thing, it's a social thing. So imagine Medology being an optimal organization that is also run by Muslims, but there's non-Muslims there as well, but it's grounded in Islamic ethic, maybe not directly, but it's grounded there, and you're a beacon of light for the community. Like, I want to be like these people, right? Because remember, being convinced of Islam is not just an intellectual issue, it's also a social issue, because people have a need to belong, and people, want to see light, right? Beacons of light. There's no point just, pontificating and preaching. Are you that which you claim to be? And that's why I'm here, because a podcast is one of your repertoire of different actions that you do in order to facilitate that goal of being the best organization that you can be. And when people see that, like, I want to join this group of people, they're amazing. Oh, and what makes them amazing, I found out, was these universal principles. Oh, and these universal principles, I found out, came from God himself, right? Do you see the point? So that's still part of my vision. That's why I'm here, dedicated to you guys, because my strategy is also developing individuals and organizations to actually achieve that goal. Do you see?
That was a masterclass.
I don't think so. I don't think so, but people could get something from it. That's enough.
So much to take.
Planting the seeds, I say, sometimes we think we have to deliver everything in one go or do it perfectly, but now I've come to the position where if you're able to just plant seeds in people's hearts and minds, that's enough. You've done your job, and then they could continue their spiritual and intellectual and social journey.
One thing you told me one time was that one event will never change someone's life, but thousands of events will. And similarly, one podcast or whatever won't. But being that person that listens to these things will eventually lead to transformation.
Every drop raises the ocean.
Beautiful quote. And actually, um, kind of linking to that, but also linking to your something you touched upon earlier was how obviously once you've found this vision and you're advancing towards it and you're doing the work and becoming that person, it seems like on that journey, leadership often becomes something that's either thrust upon you or you just have to take it up, right? So like I know this is a massive topic and we don't probably have the time and space to unpack it to true justice now and today. But I am curious about what your biggest like pet peeve is about leadership in this modern world that we're in, like, the way it's framed or the way people see it. Because I know, you've had such a long and vast journey with it. What's your biggest pet peeve about it all right now?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people. I mean, I can't. So the leadership I've been in is not like business or anything. It's more organizational, charity, not humanitarian, but they've had charitable objects, or they've been, it's about narratives and education and outreach and all of those things. I can't claim, a pattern that I've perceived in the kind of leadership in across all kind of areas. But what I've seen, especially within our community, people think that, leadership is a title, but it's not. It's actually a way of being. And people think now leadership is also a status thing. It's actually not. You're going to be leadership is service. So my kind of pet peeve is that people think it's like, oh yes, I'm the boss or I'm the one leading. No. The other thing is people think that, people also fall in love with leadership. They have a love for leadership, which is not Islamic, by the way. It's not godly. You could supplicate to God to be a leader, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to now love leadership. Yeah, like I want to be known for being the leader. That's blameworthy. But God tells in the Quran to supplicate for leadership. Yeah, so we could, because we have something to offer. We're committed to the well-being of humanity. We want to serve God. Those are all noble. But to love leadership in your heart from a kind of egocentric perspective, an egotistical perspective, that yes, I want to be known as the CEO. That's a huge problem. Yeah, and if you have that, then it actually is a sign that you shouldn't be in a position of leadership. So the kind of pet peeve is people think generally that leadership is a status symbol. Leadership is me being the boss and telling people what to do, but it's not. It's about love service. Leadership is about being at service, and that requires humility as well. And also, the other pet peeve is that people have a love for this, so they want to be known as leading and the top guy. But that's all not good leadership. Yeah, so we have to learn what good leaders do, and good leaders are essentially, I frame it as love service leadership. You take all the blame, none of the credit. That's really leadership, to be honest.
There is one principle that I did want to touch on today because it's something that I think it's not just in leadership, but it transcends a lot of different themes you talk about, and something that we regurgitate a lot between the team at Medology to the students that we serve and whatever else. And that principle is that states of being give rise to states of being. You've talked about this many times, but I'm actually curious and I've never asked you this. I'm curious when you first realized that, or what kind of experience was it that made you realize that, yeah, states of being give rise to states of being.
Yeah, so from a leadership perspective, when I say states of being give rise to states of being, is, say you want your team or the people around you that you want to influence to be compassionate, then you need to be compassionate, because compassion gives rise to compassion. If you're at home and you would take leadership at home and you want love at home, then you need to be loving. You can't wait for people to love you. You have to be loving, yeah? If you want to teach your children humility, you need to be humble. If you want to teach your children forgiveness, you need to be forgiving. So forgiveness gives rise to forgiveness. Humility gives rise to humility. If you want people to be passionate, you need to be passionate. So your way of being, what you say, your emotions and how you act should be passionate if you want people to be passionate. So passion gives rise to passion. And that's a key leadership principle, which is very important. And it's also connected to, you know, be that which you want other people to become. Yeah. Like you enroll people in your behavior, enroll people in your behavior, enroll people in your way of being. So if you want people to be charitable, then you need to be charitable. Yeah. If you want people to be service driven, then you need to be you need to lead the way, right? That's what leadership is all about. It's not about telling people what to do. It's about being that which you want others to become. And that's very difficult. Yeah. So that's what states of being give rise to states of being actually means. And the way you express that state of being is through your language, through your emotions, and through your behavior. There's no other way, actually. Yeah. So focus on what you say. So if you want, for example, a positive state of being, then you're not going to start being saying, you're not going to start saying, oh, we don't have any money, we can't achieve this, I'm really sorry, we have to start sacking everyone. That's not very positive, right? Now, there's times for that discourse in certain contexts, but generally speaking, that's not positive framing language wise. Your emotions, you should be genuinely, authentically positive, have a positive outlook, yeah? And your behavior should be connected to that, right? So that's how your state of being will be positive. Now, if you don't have a positive state of being, you're not going to give rise to other positive states of being. So this is linked to it's linked to your way of being, but it's linked to your enrollment. You're enrolling people in a particular behavior. I remember once someone came up to me and said, "There's no love at home," and I said to them, "When was the last time that you said to your parents you loved them? You've been waiting, haven't you? Well, you're part of the problem. Enroll people in your behavior. Oh, there's no forgiveness at home. Okay, when was the last time you forgave anyone? I haven't done anything wrong. Oh, really? Do you see my point? You haven't forgiven anyone, so why do you think that's going to happen? And that's what you see in certain households, because a household is like it's a leadership scenario, right? Or even in like an organization, yeah, when people have to, I don't know, do certain things. Let's focus on the family. So if you want forgiveness at home, and as a parent, especially as a father from an Islamic perspective, who's like on top of the hierarchy, especially strategically, intellectually, and morally, someone has to make a decision. You can't have two drivers of a car, right? And that doesn't mean you don't consult with your wife and the rest of the family. Of course, that's in place, and there's compassion and so on and so forth, but someone has to make a decision. And someone has to take lead in many cases. So, the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, said, kullukum ra'in, everyone is a shepherd, and he talks about, the leader, then the parent, then the father, then the mother, then so on and so forth. So everyone has leadership. Um, everyone is a leader. Everyone's a shepherd. So we have our leadership, and there's different hierarchy. There's a different hierarchy in the Islamic paradigm, but we don't have to discuss that right now. Point is, if you want, your children to be charitable, you have to show them. You can't say be charitable. You have to enroll them in that behavior. If you want to be forgiving, you need to be forgiving. If you need to be passionate, you need to be passionate. So when someone's come from a passionate background because they've had an environment of passion, because that gives birth to passion, isn't it? Yeah. Unless they've been blessed by God. Yeah. Like, they could come from a dispassionate upbringing, but yet they're so passionate. That's a gift for sure. But generally speaking, enroll people in your behavior. And that is very difficult because you have to be cognizant as a leader. Am I being that which I want other people to become? So you just ask yourself that question all the time. Am I being that which I want my team to become? And that's a difficult thing, right? And that requires a lot of self-exploration. That requires that you have your own vision. That requires that you have to do the own internal hard work as well. So, if you want your team to be committed to the well-being of other people, then you need to be committed to the well-being of your team. And you need to show that. And you need to show that you're actually committed to them, that they come first. Like Simon Sinek's book, which is Leaders Eat Last, which is true. Like, serve your team. If you want your team to be, at service to others, then you should serve your team. You should eat last. Their needs come before yours, right? So yeah, that way of being is very important. But sometimes, unfortunately, leadership we think is just do what you're told. I've got a vision. I've got a strategy. Just listen to this. That may end up you having success and achieving what you want to achieve. but it won't be principled, it won't be meaningful. And generally speaking, in the long term, you might not be as successful as people who have basically focused on the right way of being, because that would create a culture not only in your lifetime but in the lifetimes in other lifetimes, meaning people who came after you, and you're there for the infinite game, right? So um you know, can you be rich and financially successful by stabbing a couple of friends in the back? You probably can, but is that success? Yeah, so you got to be principled. Like my view is, do the right thing irrespective of the consequence, because you can be successful but you broke your own principles, and how that's not really success, is it? So I usually say, if you had a choice between principle and power, but you chose power over principle, then power will become your weakness. But if you chose principle over power or authority, then principle will become your success in the long term.
So many seeds planted. And I hope you guys listening will go and actually think about these things as well, because there's so much to take. And there's a lot of content that you've put out on these things as well, which they should definitely check out and look into. Um, I know we've taken up a lot of your time. We've, been going on for like well over an hour now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It hasn't felt that long.
The final thing that I want to just wrap up on, this is just maybe a bit selfish question of me, but I'm asking in an egoless way. I'm just genuinely curious because you've talked about how you're involved with Medology and whatever else. Um, Say you had to leave us as Medology with a challenge, like as an organization, as a group of people, as a community, with something to live up to, like some sort of goal, some sort of objective. What sort of challenge would you leave us with? What would you want to see from us, 10, 20, 30 years, 50 years down the line, from everything you've seen from now and where we could go?
Yeah, that's a very good question. What challenge would I leave with you guys in order to basically achieve what you want to achieve, right?
Or where do you want to see us, like that type of thing? Take your time. I know it's a
I mean, it's a very difficult question. I mean, methodology has its vision, right? So uh, ideally, you want to see yourself closer to that vision becoming a reality. And that may mean you creating other leaders or people who are connected to that vision and they have the optimal way of being to achieve that particular vision. But it can also mean, and just stand in this possibility, that your vision completely changes. Because sometimes when we talk about a vision, we think it's like a Moses tablet, right? But we always say that your vision may change every 2 or 3 or 4 years because of social, political, and other circumstances. So, say for example, your vision is to, build an empire, right? But your kind of subvision is to ensure that people are successful in the medical and dentistry journey, right? Now, you may achieve that to a certain degree, say for example, but you may have to stand in the possibility that you've adopted a lot of experience and skills and values and principles that you can achieve that and more, or something else, right? Because the world doesn't just need doctors and dentists, right? The world needs optimal flourishing, because another one of your main visions is that you want human beings to be physically have optimal well-being. Optimal well-being is not just related to me being a doctor and a dentist, right? I mean, many doctors don't have well-being. They're stressed out, man. Some of them, I think, alcoholics or something. They get underpaid, overworked. Let's be honest, right? I remember relatively recently, I had to be in a hospital for a scan in my brain. It was self-inflicted. Yeah, it was from a boxing fight, and basically, I was really thankful to the staff. I was like, "You guys get underpaid." I said, "If I become a prime minister, I'm gonna make sure we triple your wage." And they were like, "Oh, really? Thank you. This. You guys are, working really hard." And anyway, the point is, you know, I think Medology would definitely transform. I don't see Medology just focusing on getting people into dentistry and medicine. No way. I see in the next 5 years, I see you getting human beings into an optimal state. psychologically, spiritually, intellectually, and otherwise. And obviously, for me, that means submitting to God. How you do that, the strategy that you adopt, I don't know. But I do believe that definitely, because I've engaged with the brothers and the sisters and the leadership in Medology, the skills that you have, the commitment that you have, the sincerity that you have, the passion that you have is kind of almost second to none, especially many of you are like still in your 20s as well. It's like, wow, it's very inspirational. So I do see that changing. You definitely keep it. You'll have your people getting into medicine and dentistry, but that wider vision that you've already communicated to the public, which at the moment is still connected to the dentistry medical stuff, I still think the main challenge will be is how do you now evolve your strategy to actually see a world where human beings are optimized, they have well-being, and that is not just focused on getting people into dentistry and medicine. It's going to be something else. How you achieve that, I leave it to your hands, but that will be the challenge. So I reckon maybe in the next 3 to 5 years, Medology is going to be something bigger than it even realizes. But the way to do that is to focus on what you're doing right now, stay sincere, have that love service leadership, follow certain key principles, but have your eye on the prize, which is, you know what? We're doing really well with this. We could keep it going organically and our strategies in place to get people to dentistry and medicine. But we have this big goal, lofty goal that we've already announced, which is making sure that people have well-being, optimal well-being, flourishing. Well, how are we going to achieve that now? Because that's not the only way, and that's a micro way of doing it. So what else are we going to do? So the challenge is thinking about that for the next 3 to 5 years. And if I'm around, I'll help you with that in any way, shape, or form, even if it means maybe cleaning your toilets.
You have much more of a bigger and vital role than that. But even though toilet cleaning is important for sure,
They actually made, like back in the day in Al Azhar University, one of the greatest Islamic universities, which is in Egypt, they used to get the future scholars to clean toilets because it was so important for them to be in that spiritual state of humility and service, because it facilitated the right way of being in the right heart state in order for that knowledge to not only be acquired but internalized, because you can't plant a seed in a rock. And if your heart is hard, then you could have all the knowledge in the world, but it's not going to transform you or anybody else. But if it's soft, and that can become soft spiritually through service, through humility, then you could change not only your life, but the life of everybody else around you.
you're too kind, dear Dr. Andreas. To be. I'm allowed to say fingers crossed or no?
Well, we make dua, we supplicate, we pray to God. Absolutely, absolutely.
But thank you so much for your time, as always. Even for someone that spent a lot of time with you, it's always amazingly just refreshing to just listen from your insights and benefit from the wisdom. So
No, thank you for having me. Thank you.
I hope you keep coming as a regular guest. Hope you enjoy the podcast studio that we have built.
No, I love it. It's beautiful. And what I would say is maybe one day we could zoom in on the specific topics and zoom in further on them, because they're massive topics to some.
The point of today was more like an intro to everyone who may not have come across you. That who is this sensei, and what, and get a flavor of all the different themes and insights you have to share. Would love to, keep having you back and deep dive into specific things because there's so much.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
it'd be a pleasure.
absolutely. But thank you guys for your time as well. If you made it this far, then clearly it shows that you're someone that has a genuine drive and desire to become the best version of yourself. And if you've made it this far, then you really should not be missing out on anything that we do leading on from this, because this is speaking directly to you. And there's a reason that you've stayed on till now. So cherish that and cultivate it. But we'll leave you for now. We'll leave you for today. And I just want to say thank you once again to you, dear Sensei. And hope to see you soon.